In old Chinese history, emperors and nobles were known to have concubines. Each concubine's life was very different, but there was one thing that almost all of them had in common. They were frequently subjected to horrible acts. We will be looking at the cruel lives of concubines during the Ming Dynasty. You may also hear it called the Great Ming Dynasty. The Ming Dynasty began in 1368. People today think of it as one of the most amazing times in Chinese history. One reason for this is that a strong, well-run government was put in place, which made the whole country feel safe. People remember the dynasty for its good morals, which came from Confucianism. But it was also a time of a lot of crime, including brutal killings and a lot of adultery. The first emperor of the Great Ming Dynasty was called Zhu Yanzhang and was Wu. Zhu was born into a poor family and lived in poverty for the first 24 years of his life. However, he went on to become one of the most powerful leaders in history and led the army that drove the Mongols out of China. The Hongwu Emperor wanted to make a society that could take care of itself, and the lands did very well while he was in charge. Beijing was built and made the capital city of China during the Ming Dynasty. Many other towns in China were also built during this time. Along with that, many big parts of the Great Wall were fixed up and made stronger than they had ever been during that time. The Ming Dynasty is often called one of the best times in history, and it's easy to see why. However, not everyone had it so good. In this case, we are especially talking about concubines. For those who don't know what a concubine is, it's a woman who lives with a guy but is less important than his wife or wives. A rule from the Ming Dynasty said that almost any man could have a concubine. It was specifically written in the law that a guy could marry another woman if he was over 40 and didn't already have a son. It's interesting that the first wife got to choose the mistress for her husband. That's what makes a concubine different from a prostitute. Having a concubine during the Ming Dynasty was pretty much the same as having a second wife. The only difference was that the second wife wasn't as respected as the first wife. A courtesan, on the other hand, was like an escort or high-class prostitute in ancient China. As with most empire rules, this one only applied to regular people. This meant that a citizen had to wait until he was 40 years old before taking a concubine. The ruler, on the other hand, could have as many wives as he wanted in order to have children and keep the family line going. Some kings are said to have had as many as 10,000 concubines. However, it's more likely that having a lot of wives was a way to show how powerful and wealthy someone was. People who are interested in where all of these wives came from should know that not all of them joined the emperor voluntarily, though that did happen a few times. A woman usually became a concubine when she was either kidnapped and brought to the emperor on his orders, or when her father gave her to the emperor as a gift to make him like her. When a woman became a concubine, the only way for the ruler to get rid of her was to give her away as a gift. It turned out that becoming a slave wasn't always a bad thing. It was written that concubines could often go to college, even though they were still treated horribly most of the time. A concubine, on the other hand, could not leave the palace she belonged to unless the ruler told her to. So, as one of the emperor's lesser wives, she was stuck there and had to stay in that part of the house her whole life. In all honesty, a concubine woman spent most of her time in her room. She could only leave when the emperor called her to join him in his room. It is also important to remember that foot binding was popular in ancient China, especially during the Ming Dynasty. This was done to concubines. When feet are bound, they are wrapped in a band that is so tight that the bones inside the feet often break. It was meant to keep women's feet small, but what it really did was make them sit still. As you might guess, tying your feet is a very painful practice that hurt a woman for the rest of her life. In order to keep the emperor's concubines in their rooms even longer, they were often forced to be moved from one place to another. To make things even worse, they were often carried around naked. At the time of the Ming Dynasty, many of these concubines were treated very badly. Foot binding was one of the less bad things that happened to them. When it comes down to it, the Empress's concubines have been mistreated since the start of the Great Ming Dynasty. A lot of men joined the army of the Hongwu Emperor because he was known as a cruel military commander. His great vision led to the start of the dynasty, but his anger didn't stop when he left the fight. He turned out to be just as bloodthirsty with his concubines as he was with other people. People think that the Hongwu Emperor would beat, cut up, and kill his concubines because he was jealous and needed to be in charge. He was so obsessed with this need that he would even haunt his concubines after he died. After the Hongwu Emperor died, he didn't want any of his ex-wives to get married or be with someone else. So, when he died, he told his servants to bury all of his concubines with him in any way they thought was right. In this case, the concubines were given the option of attempting suicide, being put to death, or being buried alive. They had to die with their ruler, no matter what. What happened when future rulers heard about the Hongwu's plan to kill all of her concubines? Liked the idea. They made it a tradition that when an emperor died, all of his concubines were sent to the grave with him. This practice continued until it was made illegal in 1464. Sad to say, this wasn't the only horrible thing these women had to go through to become an empress's slave. As you might expect, a concubine could only be with her supposed husband. If she was found having an affair, she would be put to death. The way they were executed often changed. During one of the most famous examples of this, more than 2,500 women in the house were killed. In the year 1421, one of the emperor's most important concubines was thought to have been seeing one of the court eunuchs. I'll never understand how that could have worked. It didn't take long for the word to get around the house that the concubine had been poisoned. But that wasn't the end of the damage. Historiographers think that anyone who knew about the pair was put to death so that the story wouldn't spread. Almost 2,800 young women and girls as young as 12 were among them. They weren't put to death quickly, though. There is another story that says these 2,800 women and children were killed in a way that is often called death by 1,000 cuts, an extremely slow and unbearably painful way to kill someone, in which body parts are slowly cut off while the person is still alive and aware for most of the process. These many people were put to death, and the courts didn't write about it. But one woman from that time did write about it. When word got out about her work, she was also killed very quickly. Now, during the rule of Xi Jing, one of the worst stories from the Ming dynasty about how badly concubines were treated almost every day came to light. Xi Jing had a strange opinion that the blood from a virgin's period could do magic. He even said it held the key to living forever. There are written accounts and stories from when Xi Jing was ruler that say he took thousands of concubines from their homes and made them live in his palace. To make sure the women stayed clean, he had his guards follow very strict rules once they got there. This meant that they had to eat only berries, which was a very strict diet that wasn't healthy at all. Yes, just berries. Not any other fruit or veggie, and most definitely not any kind of meat. Because, well, you can guess, no one can live on a berry diet, let alone a plan that only includes certain berries. The only things that Xi Jing's concubines could eat were mulberries and dew. Many of the women who were forced to do this died of hunger and malnutrition, and for many of his concubines, this was the last straw. News stories say that many of Xi Jing's wives waited until he was in the room of his favorite mistress before attacking him. Researchers think that the concubine told all of her servants to leave the room, and as soon as they did, the other women showed up. They all went after Xi Jing and used a ribbon and then a silk curtain to try to choke him to death. Even so, they weren't able to kill him before one of his other concubines told the empress what was going on. Then, she told the guards to kill all of her husband's concubines in the same terrible way that 2,800 women were killed after the affair in 1421, which was called death by 1,000 cuts. But it didn't end there. As a bonus, the queen also told them to kill all of the concubines' families, Even that doesn't cover everything, but it's very clear that being a concubine in the Ming dynasty was not a peaceful time. After hearing all of that, what do you think about the Ming dynasty? Is it still one of the most important times in history? Tell us in the comments what you think. We hope you liked this video. Watch another video here.